This third question, question C, is explain the effects of hyperinflation in 1923 on Germany and its people. 8 marks. Okay, so on the Weimar Republic and the people as a nation. Hyperinflation. The prices of goods going up and up and up to an unsustainable, unaffordable level in 1923. If you break this question down simply, it means what were the consequences and why did they happen? Okay? What was the impact? Try to write 3 to 4 strong paragraphs using the P or Peel approach. Make your point, evidence and explain it, and then link it to the next paragraph. So let's look at what detail, what knowledge we would select from our learning to include in this answer. All points have to include explanation if you're going to gain the most marks. Here's an example. Hyperinflation had a terrible effect on people's lives. For many, their standard of living was totally destroyed. Pensioners were a very good example of this. Workers could get more wages, but many pensioners were on a fixed income. The price of everyday necessities, such as food and clothes, were far higher than their income, and their pensions became worthless. Pensioners, unlike workers, had no way of getting a rise. Workers on fixed wages experienced the same problems and were soon having to be paid daily rather than weekly to try to keep up with the rate of inflation. That's a really good paragraph. That paragraph alone will probably gain you 3 marks. Okay, we need to write 1 or 2 more. But if we think about that paragraph and you stop and pause it and think about what I'm saying, workers were being paid on a daily basis and the amount they were being paid was obscene, and yet this could not buy them a loaf of bread. And yet people who were on fixed incomes, like pensioners, they had no pay rise. So really they were living in extreme poverty because their low pensions meant nothing anymore because of hyperinflation. They couldn't buy the basic necessities, so pensioners were starving and in a very, very dire situation. The same could be said, another impact or effect would be on people who had savings. Many of the middle class, for example, had their savings wiped out overnight because it was worthless money. It meant nothing anymore. If you had 20,000 marks, that's the currency, remember, saved up, and suddenly a loaf of bread was worth 200,000 million marks, you had technically nothing in your bank account. So, middle class people or people with savings were left impoverished and they lost their savings overnight. A positive impact would be those who had loans or had to pay back a high rate of interest were better off because actually their loans were worthless now. The money was could be paid off quite instantly and they were out of debt even though they were still going through hyperinflation. Another impact would be that everyone suffered from shortages. This was because German marks became worthless in comparison with foreign currency. In 1918, £1 cost 20 marks. By November 1923, £1 cost 20 billion marks. So foreign suppliers refused to accept marks for goods. They couldn't trust the German currency. So the imports, the goods coming into the country, dried up. There was a shortage of food and other goods. This was a very serious effect. This had a very serious impact on the standard of living of Germans. They could not buy the necessities that they needed because Germany could not make everything for its own people, especially after the traumatic years of recovery after 1918. People had to use wheelbarrows to take bundles of money down to buy the basic necessities like milk, bread, for example. Some suppliers refused to take money at all. You're better off burning it to keep warm, and asked for payment in kind by swapping goods. Another impact would be big businesses and industrialists who had borrowed heavily profited because their debts plummeted. So many people were better off if they owned industries and businesses. Another example, foreign visitors who benefited from the strength of their currency against this weak German currency. Basically, the exchange rate was very good for them. Overall, one of the biggest effects was the damage that hyperinflation did to the Weimar Republic and its reputation. The middle classes suffered terribly, i.e. the loss of pensions, savings for example, and turned on the Weimar Republic. The middle class was supposed to be the bedrock of support for the Weimar. Remember, the working class was gravitating towards communism. But now they'd lost confidence, and many blamed the Weimar Republic for the extreme suffering and poverty caused through hyperinflation. That's another big impact. I'm just going to briefly run through, for revision purposes, how hyperinflation occurred. This is the causes, not linked to this. This question up here, look, is about the effects, the impact. So be careful. But just to remind you, it happened because Germany could not pay its debts, its reparations. And so the French sent troops into the German industrial area, the Ruhr. They confiscated raw materials, manufactured goods and industrial machinery. This angered the Germans, who downed tools and went on strike. The Germans who worked in the Ruhr. This was known as passive resistance. The Germans bitterly resented what the French had done. They doubly resented the failure of the Weimar Republic. That is one of the impacts of hyperinflation. But this is what caused hyperinflation. The French being in the Ruhr meant that the German industrial output, the goods they were making, plummeted. Therefore there was a real shortage of goods and workers lost their job. So there was high unemployment too. This meant there was poverty all over Germany, and for the Weimar Republic, who could not collect taxes anymore because of high unemployment. But this also led to inflation. Because there was such a shortage of goods, the prices rocketed up and up and up, and the government needed the money to pay the reparations. But unemployment and the failing factories meant they received much less money in taxes. So they printed more money. The government in 1923 had 300 paper mills and 2,000 printing shops to print more money. As they printed more money, they became caught in a vicious circle. The prices were going up, the more money was printed to cover this, and this made prices rise again and again to an extreme level, hence the term hyperinflation.